All right, folks. It looks like we've got everyone we're going to get. So thank you again so much. If you haven't had a chance yet, please would love if you could type out your name, your organization, and where you're calling in from. If you could put that information in the chat. As a reminder, this meeting will be recorded. The recording should have already started. And everyone that signed up, whether or not they actually made it, everyone that signed up will receive an email, a follow-up email with a link to the recording. We are also planning to put all of these recordings for all of our lunch and learns. All of those are going to be housed in an archived library. And so we'll make sure that each of you get a link to that. But as we move forward, of course, today is all about urban conservation and grantee reporting. So as we move forward, if there's ever a question like, oh, what was that great point that they made, or what was that thing that they encouraged us to think about when filling out and completing our grantee reporting, you'll be able to go back and reference this lunch and learn. So yeah. I next slide, please. So here's just a rundown of our agenda today. We have some welcome and introductions, intro to Parks with Purpose Lunch and Learn. So Isabel is going to provide an introduction to just the whole Lunch and Learn series that we are starting to launch. We'll talk about our Parks with Purpose grants and just our internal process, provide some transparency, and happy to answer any questions there. We will show you our new grant reporting process, which includes it's in two components. So it includes a narrative grant reporting template as well as a budget reporting template. And then we're very, very happy to have our colleague Angelo from our finance department joining us today. And he's going to be talking about some grantee responsibilities. At the end of the presentation, we'll have some time for question and answers. So you might notice that everyone is on mute right now. You won't have the opportunity to ask your questions in live time, but you can put them in the chat. So if you think of a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and we will try to address all of the questions or comments in that chat, as I said, when we get to the Q&A portion of this Lunch and Learn. With that, I just want to thank you all again. This is great turnout. This is our very first Lunch and Learn. It's always a little scary when you're doing something new. So greatly appreciate you guys taking the time this afternoon, making this work. I'll kick us off with introductions. I think each of you know me, but my name is Tony Richardson. I'm the Director of Urban Conservation Initiatives with the Conservation Fund, and I will ask the other presenters to introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Isabel Lyon. I'm our urban associate here at the Conservation Fund. I think I also know most of you. Very excited to be kicking this off with all of you. Thank you for being here today. And then I'm going to pass it to Angelo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelo Tan, and I'm a finance manager here at the Conservation Fund, and I'm excited to help present this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you. So Lunch and Learns, what are these? Are we going to keep doing them? This year, we heard it loud and clear at our peer exchange last year that we wanted to kind of have an ongoing form of some kind of training and informational sessions, and also a chance to see each other all the time. So we're going to start launching our Parks with Purpose Lunch and Learn webinar series. They're going to be bi-monthly, and they're designed to provide our partners with best practices, resources, and tools from experts within the Conservation Fund and our Parks with Purpose team as well. So today we're going to focus on urban conservation grants, components of grant agreements, and our new grant reporting process, and more specifically our financial reporting process for those Lunch and Learns. Our next two Lunch and Learns, we've decided on topics for. The one that's coming next after this, I believe, is going to be in July. It's going to be engaging social media and how to do that successfully through the lens of programmatic work. And the one after that, which is going to be around October, is going to be fundraising and grant application writing. So, yeah, we're very excited about it. And if you guys ever have any ideas that you want to have for Lunch and Learns, I know we had it in the pre-registration webinar link, but please feel free to email me anytime with any suggestions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isabel. And just to reiterate what Isabel said, we really are looking for these lunch and learns to touch on the themes and the topics that you all are interested in. So if you have any ideas, hey Tony, we would really like to talk about urban gardening. We'd really like to talk about urban agriculture, community gardens. We'd really like to, like, literally whatever the theme is. We'd really like to talk about federal funding. We have a wealth of knowledgeable staff members within the Conservation Fund that we are happy to tap and bring them into these lunch and learns. Another big one is that we've talked about with a lot of you is acquisition. That's not something that Isabel and I directly work on, but if there are questions among our Parks with Purpose network about the Conservation Fund, our acquisition services, how we go about them, how you can partner with us on acquisitions through urban conservation, all of those types of things, more than happy to bring in some of our acquisition staff as well. So again, yeah, this is our blank canvas to create as we will. So definitely would love to hear feedback from you all. All right, we're going to keep it moving. So an overview of our urban conservation grants. So through our urban conservation grants, and we will refer to these moving forward as our Parks with Purpose grants. So urban conservation is the umbrella. Of course, me and Isabel on the urban conservation team. Parks with Purpose is a program underneath that umbrella. So there's a lot of other things that we do that wouldn't necessarily be considered a Parks with Purpose project, partnership, or program that still falls under urban conservation. But all of you that we're talking to today are in the Parks with Purpose network, but you may hear us use that term interchangeably. So just wanted to provide some context there. So through our urban conservation grants, the fund seeks to advance the objectives of its Parks with Purpose initiative, which aims to support historically underserved and currently under-resourced communities. The program has two primary but related objectives. The first is adding or improving access to neighborhood parks or similar urban green space projects. So again, we know that we work on a lot of other things and have had the pleasure of working on a lot of other things than just neighborhood parks, whether those be trails, community gardens, whether those be food forests, whether that be a historical and cultural preservation project. But again, just looking at how do we add or improve access to these amazing neighborhood amenities, these amazing urban green spaces. And second is helping to develop greater capacity in neighborhood institutions such as you all, grassroots community-based organizations that activate the parks and community. So yeah, next slide, please. So the Conservation Fund, as many of you know, we are not kind of your standard, your typical grant making organization. Like I always think, I actually used to be a fundraising officer, so I always think back to like Patagonia or the North Face, right? There's some entities that have a very specific grant program. It launches at the same time every year. It has the same kind of focus every year, and so you can kind of put it on your calendar and say, okay, next spring we're going to apply for this North Face funding, or next spring we're going to apply for this Comcast funding. It could be a corporation. The Conservation Fund, we don't really have those really clearly, or I shouldn't say clearly defined, but we don't have those standard bucket. So we don't have established grant programs. We don't have established or standard grant making criteria, nor do we have sort of standard grant amounts or grant ranges. That's a little bit more nuanced than that. We really rely on our existing network of Parks with Purpose partners. So all of you to sort of point us towards potential new projects, programs, and partnerships. Those could be conversations that we have with you all where you're telling us about a new project that you're getting ready to invest in. It could be a new project you're telling us about and telling us about this great new partner that you've started working with. That could be an introduction to a potential new partner. But again, we really do look pretty heavily to our existing Parks with Purpose network, the boots on the ground, our community-based partners to tell us, what's out there, to tell us what's new and innovative on the landscape. So once we sort of have identified at least a potential new project, program, or partner to work with, there's a very in-depth process that we go through of getting to know that potential partner. We really seek to understand their existing portfolio of work. We want to understand their short-term objectives as well as their long-term goals, not only for their organization, but for the community that they serve. And we also would like to be aware of any capacity needs or gaps in their funding. Gaps, what are the resources, the tools that you all need in order to accomplish those short-term objectives or long-term goals. From there, we work with you, the partner, to craft a grant agreement. And I would say that each grant agreement is unique and tailored to your organization. And so, sometimes folks will reach out to me and say, hey, Tony, we're thinking about this grant for this amount. But again, it really is sort of more of a nuanced process than that. And that, I think, is why it's so important that we have regular lines of communications, right? Like if we don't have a good understanding on the urban conservation team of what those gaps are, of what your needs are in order to accomplish what you want to accomplish, then it's really hard for us to tailor, again, the grant agreement and to include that in our grant agreement or our partnership agreement moving forward. Next slide, please. So urban conservation grants. So additionally, we also will assess, and actually, sorry, folks, we just need to take one quick pause. I think we're having some technical difficulties. Isabel, there should be a newer version of our slide deck in there. You may just need to close this out and then reload the presentation and then open it back up. So we'll just have a quick intermission, everybody. Grab some coffee if you need to. We'll be right back on in a second. Yeah, so if you just reload it, Isabel, and then reshare your screen, all of the changes that I made should now be reflected in there. Fantastic. Yeah, great. And now you can go to the next slide. Awesome, thank you. So on an annual basis, we assess where we are with the distribution of capacity grants or just urban conservation grants across our multiple city network. As all of you know, we are working right now in 7 locations. So Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Raleigh, North Carolina, Durham, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, and we have budding projects in Michigan. We're working in 3 legacy cities of Pontiac, Flint, and Saginaw. And then we also have a budding project down in Montgomery, Alabama. And so looking at, again, that sort of all of those different locations, we really just like to, I refer to it as an ecosystem, this funding ecosystem. And so it's sort of like, how can we have complementary funding that's happening in each of those locations that builds on top of each other, that really acts as catalytic funding to have a transformative impact on the communities that you all serve. So again, we want to look at what's the distribution of grants across our network, across our different locations. Oftentimes we will request a proposal from a new or existing partner. We want to work with them to define the scope of work, and we will also then negotiate on that scope of work. And so we'll have one idea, you guys might have another idea. Again, they can be closely aligned, closely related ideas, and then we'll just bat the agreement, bat the scope of work back and forth until we both feel really good about it. And request commitments of leverage support. So I'll touch on this later. Typically, this is for our capital improvement grants, our capital project grants, I should say. Those grants tend to be a little bit bigger, and we do often ask for some matching funding or some leverage support for those. Previous performance is something that we look at closely when determining funding levels or even determining whether or not to refund a community-based partner, a Parks with Purpose partner. The Conservation Fund, we evaluate grantees based on the objectives and deliverables that are listed in the scope of work in the grant agreement. And so every time you get an email from me about an upcoming grant report, I always make the point to say, please be sure to look at your grant agreement. Make sure you review the deliverables, or excuse me, make sure you review the objectives and the deliverables and speak directly to those when you are filling out your report. Because again, we oftentimes you know, as much as we like to do research on your projects, we follow all of you guys on social media, we really rely on those interim and final reports to get a snapshot on what is going on with your project. And so if you don't include things in there and we don't know them, then we can't think about how do we address that? How do we go be a good partner to you? How do we bring tools, technical assistance, or resources to help overcome that obstacle or challenge? So again, I think it's really important. We actually have a internal document that we use. It's kind of like a report card, and we will literally go through each and every objective and deliverable that was listed in each of your grant agreements, and we sort of go back and say, did they complete this? If not, was there a good reason why? Did they provide sort of adequate reasoning for why this was not completed? All of those types of things. So again, we really are looking for you as specifically as possible to address those objectives and deliverables. Next slide, please. So just a few of the types of grants that we give out are urban conservation grants. So as I said, we have our capital project grants. These support the purchase of supplies and materials and major construction elements related to a specific urban green space project. Capital project grants are typically developed in dialogue with a municipal partner and an NGO, and in general require a significant capital match. Again, I think our capital grants right now come in somewhere around $200,000. So again, these are typically much larger grants, and we are looking to see that the project also has additional sources of funding, because typically these are much larger price tags, much larger costs associated to these projects. Operational grants, these are the main types of grants that we give out. And so these support the grantee's core staff and organizational operations. This type of grant funding is intended to advance organizational capacity and increase the grantee's effectiveness and efficiency in doing the mission-based work out in their communities. These grants tend to be much more flexible than capital grants. So again, these grants, I think going back to my original point of really wanting to understand from an organizational standpoint, what are your short-term and long-term goals? But also moving forward, I think if there are challenges, if there are obstacles, if there are reasons why you couldn't complete things, we can often be a lot more flexible with these organizational grants. As long as it's within reason, we're happy to work with you to put a grant extension in place. We're happy to work with you to not necessarily redo the entire budget, but move line items, move some things around as needed. But again, it's really important that you reach out to us early, reach out to us well in advance of your interim or final report so that we can have a conversation about this, because we don't want you to be knocked down points or for your work as we're using our report card and evaluating the objectives and the deliverables, we don't want to have to give you a negative score because we haven't had that conversation and don't really understand, why those objectives or why those deliverables were not met. UCC Fellowship Grant. So this is one of our newest grants. Of course, this is in support of our Urban Conservation and Community Fellowship Program. I know there's a few folks on the call that are serving as a host organization for that. So these are really specific to that program, and these grants go again to nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations that will be hosting a fellow through the UCC Fellowship Program. And the last type of grant I wanted to talk about are Michigan mini grants. And so these support planning and implementation of small scale projects with the three legacy cities that we're working in. So Flint, Saginaw, and Pontiac. And again, these grants are specific to our urban conservation work in Michigan. Next slide. So grant reporting process. Next slide, please. So all grantees are required to provide final grant reports, and depending on the duration, how long your performance period is, potentially an interim grant report as well. The Urban Conservation Team has launched a new grant reporting process, and the new process actually is broken into two components. So we have a narrative reporting form. This is an online form, and then we also have a financial reporting form. So the narrative is the section that provides detailed detailed description of progress made to date. Grantees should take time to review their signed grant agreement and address the specific goals and deliverables outlined in the scope of work when completing the narrative reporting, when completing that narrative reporting template. Financial reporting, this includes updates and information about the use of grant funding. This is a critical component to our grant management, and this is a legal requirement for the organization. So if the conservation fund gets audited, we need to be able to show how our sub grants, the money that we put out into the field, was spent down. So just wanted to say that. I'm soon going to pass it to Isabel, and she is actually going to preview both of these forms and is actually going to walk you all through them. Before I get there, I just wanted to touch on the narrative reporting and just some best practices. A grant report narrative is not just a list of facts and figures, but it really should be a story. And I encourage you guys to think about it like that, to really tell us a story. We want to hear a story that shows how your work made a difference in the lives of your beneficiaries and the communities that you serve. The other thing that I would add, and again, I know I've repeated myself a few times here, but in addition to telling a story, it should also be honest and transparent, right? The conservation fund, the urban conservation team, we seek to be a true partner to you. That means understanding your successes and challenges, but also understanding your organization's limitations and maybe mistakes or challenges or missteps that might have been made along the way. Again, this isn't going to be a gotcha moment. We like all of you very much. Like, we want you all to be successful. And so it's more about, again, understanding other things that we can be doing different. Is there a different way that we can provide technical assistance or resources? Are there different tools that we should be providing to help make you all be as successful as you can be? So again, I just want to touch on that. Just two things to think about when you're completing the narrative reporting form. And with that, I will pass it on to Isabel.
All right, thank you. So I'm just going to go through, like Tony said, our narrative reporting template, as well as our financial reporting. We just figured it was a better way to have a more uniform reporting process. If you've received a grant or had a grant report due in the last year, you've probably had some version of this. It might not have been in this direct form, but it was in PDF form. So this will be in this form of a survey link. You can fill it out as many times as you need to, or you can take these answers and put them in a Word document and then just copy paste your answers to these questions. So just overall general information. And then this part right here will all be in your grant that was given to you on the start and the end date, as well as we want you to let us know when you submitted it. Here are the questions that have already been on our forms before. They're just in more of a question format. And as Tony said, please make sure that we're going over the scope of work in your grant agreement to make sure that we're addressing the specifics. And if you did more with that money and you want to let us know. So these are all the same questions we've had before about the progress you've made towards those deliverables, key activities, any challenges or barriers to accomplishing those deliverables. Conservation metrics that we can use. We're working on a new mapping system that we really want to be able to have those numbers. And I think that they're important as well during this reporting process, that you all can have those numbers as well. And then any significant changes, we'll go over more of the specific details on what needs to be reported as a significant change later. And then significant staffing changes and turnover has been a new one we added this year. As well as leveraged additional resources and funding. That's super important. Up here is where you're going to put your financial reporting template. So when we email you with a grant reminder, I'm going to send you this link as well as the template for your grant report for the financial reporting. And that will come out pre-filled out in the sense of the amount that's your grant is and the date that we need to have that report back by. And then the name of your organization. And so all of that on there should add up to that number. And then one thing that is also very important, they're all very important, but we really want to see photos from your projects, press releases, photos, quotes, maybe from your city council, anything you have that you want to share with us that relates to pictures, press releases, articles. Please attach them here. We're actually going to add another page that has a bunch of options because SurveyMonkey only lets you upload one file or attach them as a combined PDF if you have the capabilities to do so.
If I could, I just wanted to hop in really quickly on the photos or just other multimedia. We will reach back out to you. I mean, one of the best uses of that is we like to put it out through our communication channel. So social media, the LinkedIn, or up on our website. You know, if it's a really great update and there's enough sort of meat on the bones there, it's robust enough. It could even be, you know, turned into a blog that the Conservation Fund puts out at the national level. So just wanted to say those are kind of some of the ways that we are looking to use any photos, videos, quotes, things like that. And we will always work with you. We'll give you a heads up, let you know that we're planning to use your photo, your video, your quote, and then we will give you the opportunity to see a final version of it before it is published. So just wanted to let you guys know we're not just going to take your stuff and go, you know, throw it all over our website and not give you a heads up on how it's being used or ask for your approval before it is used. So
and so this is our new financial reporting template. So all of the financials that goes into your grant received from the Conservation Fund will be put into here. And all of this information right here is all going to be filled out before you receive this template. So it'll be specific to your organization and the grant you receive. This is just to help clear up more if you happen to be receiving more than one grant from us or a different partner organization. You'll know exactly which grant this is, and it's very clear there. And so filled out here is all straightforward. You'll put your budget line item. So for example, fencing repairs. And then you'll put the date that transaction occurred. Maybe it was $5,000. And then right here is where you're going to put your cost category. We put this in here just because it helps kind of separate maybe the difference between a capital improvement grant or an operations grant or any other kind of grant. And also will help to kind of organize your own finances and our financial end. And so I'm actually going to pass it off to Angelo, and he's going to talk about our different cost categories and how to break those down while you're filling the report out.
Thanks, Isabel. So I'm excited to share our different cost categories that we've added to the template. We've created general categories that should assist in organizing your expenses when reporting back to TCF. And this will help ensure that the correct expenses are being reported on with the correct grants. From the top, we have staffing, and that would include salary, benefits, and other employment-related costs. There's also programmatic work. This would include any costs for environmental education programs, community classes, peer exchange costs, and hosting a conference. Community outreach is a little bit different. It includes community events and advocacy, paying for survey software as well as marketing and communications for your events. Repairs is literally repairs to assets like buildings or plots. It would include site remediation, replacement fencing, and repairing trails and roads. Education and training would include costs to train your staff, diversity, equity, and inclusion training, as well as professional development classes. For example, if you feel the need to take an Excel course. Professional services is where you would have your contractors, and this is where you would list consultants, contract workers, and site inspectors. Construction expenses includes expenses related to capital improvements. This is like new shed construction, new garden beds, new fencing, and other items like park benches. Lastly, if none of these expenses fit into the categories, you can choose miscellaneous. Of course, please reach out to Tony or Isabel or your point of contact with your grant to see if the cost can be attributed to one of the other previous categories, as miscellaneous should really only be used as a last resort. And I'll turn it back to Isabel.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angelo. So this will be the report that we send out now. And so we just ask that when you fill out your final SurveyMonkey report that you attach this spreadsheet as well. And so with that, I'll turn back over to the presentation. We're going to switch over to some best practices for grant reporting and financial reporting at the Conservation Fund.
Okay, next slide. So first, let's understand some general but important knowledge when receiving a grant with the Conservation Fund. It may be obvious, however, I want to reiterate reading the entire agreement. This will ensure compliance and understanding of the grants. While reviewing, you should research hard to understand language or consult an attorney. Grantees should also note key information such as the total award amounts and important dates such as the grant term, payment schedules, and due dates for reporting. The scope of work should be clear and deliverables attainable for you and your organization. Timely reporting is a necessary best practice to ensure being a good steward of granted funds. Using tools like Outlook Calendar or an online tracker will assist in timely submission and to communicate any delays. This can also keep your financial reports current, and any updates to the project should be communicated. Next is understanding the source of funding. There are different rules and requirements based on where the funds originated from. TCF grants out private dollars, and we are obligated to let you know if we pass through any federal funds. However, it's your responsibility to understand the source and any requirements that may entail. Lastly, I wanted to make note of acknowledgements, and this would include official letters accepting the grant and giving credit to TCF in marketing and communications. Okay, next slide. So now we move on to budgeting and reporting. During the proposal stage, I wanted to share some key information to know. Your budget should match the statement of work and fully spend down any funds requested. You can even use the financial reporting template to assist in creating your budget. The information needs to be succinct, so thorough, but to the point. During this process, think about doing an analysis and understand the risks and rewards of taking on the grant. For term length, think realistically. How long would it take to accomplish the goals set forth in the proposal? Lastly, when building a budget, one should make sure the expenses and employee rates are keeping up with current prices and cost of living adjustments. This can be as simple as doing a web search of rates in your area. Now, after the award is given, the work starts there is an interim report. Here you'll want to do a budget to actual. Compare what you've spent so far to the budget you submitted in the proposal. The financial reporting template should assist in categorizing your expenses so you can see where you're over or underspent. Each grant is different, and delays or employees leaving happen all the time. So when reviewing the budget to actual, you'll be able to clearly see where the variances are. This is the time to think about why there's variances. Is the discrepancy over or under 10% of what was budgeted? If so, can you reasonably explain it? Think about how this affects the remaining spending on the grant and what you need to do after. Would this delay the timeline of the grant, or is it on track? Consider if you need to decrease or increase your spending. If none of that is feasible, do you need to request an amendment or extension to the award? While working on the interim report or midway through the grant term, this would be the perfect time to evaluate this and ask the TCF team what options you have. So if all goes well with the interim report, next would be the closeout process along with the final reports. The report should be complete and accurate with succinct descriptions. Please only include relevant information as well as only including expenses that are related to the grant you're reporting on. The financial reporting template should help anyone who needs assistance in organizing their expenses a little clearer. Additionally, please share any matching funds you may have received to assist in the completion of the project. That information would include the name of the funding organization or individual with key dates such as the start and end date of the grant and the awarding date if that is different. Additionally, we ask that you please include any photography and other media you may have taken for the project. Okay, next slide. All right, in our last slide, we'll speak to the documentation you may need for grants from the Conservation Fund. In the pre-award phase, you'll want to have the latest financial statements in the Form 990, as well as copy of your IRS determination letter and current Form W-9. If you don't have these documents yourself as an individual, we'll work with your fiscal sponsor. The scope of work should be thorough and complete with a full budget. Now, after getting the award, regarding reporting, you should submit the narrative report as well as a budget to actual. While it may not be asked for, it's a good idea to keep the backup documents for expenses listed on the financial report template. The documents you should keep are receipts, invoices, and expense reports, email communications, bank statements, accounting records, timesheets, and any project-related documentation like permits. Lastly, please do not include unpaid or irrelevant expenses in your budget reports or any unsolicited documents.
Great. So thank you so much, Angelo. We will now move into questions and answers. If you guys have any specific questions, comments for us, please feel free to put them in the chat right now and we will address them. And I just wanted to thank you all again. I mean, we don't do this work alone. I think this is truly a symbiotic relationship. I mean, you know, we love the work that each of you are doing and just are so grateful for your continued partnership. And we hope that you guys feel the same way. You know, me and Isabel are always open, always happy to receive emails from you if you have a question for us, whether it's a technical project or program related question, or it's an internal question talking about one of our grant agreements, if you need an extension, if you need to reallocate some funds, if you need to move some things around. But we just hope that we can have those open lines of communication. And again, it is never a type of situation where we are looking to have a gotcha moment or sort of, you know, paint you guys in a bad light. It's more just, we don't know what we don't know. So if you don't share that information with us, then again, it's just sort of out there floating in the ether. And so we want to make sure that we are being as good a partner to you all as we can be. And the other thing that I will say is moving forward, again, we can be very flexible. So just if there's ever anything, if you think, oh no, we need to request an extension, or oh no, there's more than a 10% variance or something like that, feel free to reach out to me. Always happy to have a conversation about that. So, all right, it looks like we've got a few questions. So the first is, we received a mini grant and all of the funds were spent on a single contractor and the project was completed within 30 days of our award date. Is it okay that our report is shorter? It is very straightforward and we're working on after photos this season. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't feel like it needs to be superfluous. Like, you don't need to include a bunch of extra language in there, right? We've all done that. The teacher's like, it must be 2 pages. And so we're all like double spacing and don't feel that you need to do that. But we think that, you know, just, we just want to make sure that you're going beyond just the numbers. And so, for instance, if your event is focused on community engagement events, rather than just say, oh, we did 10 community engagement events and engaged on average 20 community members per event for a total of X number of community members, really tell us, like, what was the impact? Perhaps include a quote from one of the participants, one of the residents that came out to that event talking about how great it was, things like that. And so, again, that's a great question. I'm always happy on a case-by-case basis. If you want to reach out to me and just have a conversation in advance of submitting your report, always happy to have that conversation. So yeah, thank you for that question. Another question from Sherry Taylor. Does the support documentation need to be attached to the grant report? Does Dropbox SharePoint link work for sharing photos and large video files? So yes to both, Sherry.
I was going to say, I can hop in right there. We're actually going to add, in addition to the file upload box on the grant reporting template, for the narrative reporting template, we are going to add a section to include links if, like, you have so many pictures, we want to see more than less. So if you have a Google Drive or a SharePoint, Dropbox or Flickr, just put the link in there, make sure that we can have access, and that works as well.
Yeah, so yeah, as Isabel said, I think, you know, however you can get those photos to us, we're happy to have them. We are exploring some ways to make it a little bit more User friendly through SurveyMonkey. That's one of the things that we really like about using SurveyMonkey for the narrative reporting is it's just so straightforward and kind of streamlined. So if we can figure out how to do it through SurveyMonkey, we will. If not, then we would happily receive any links to Google Drive or Dropbox that include photos and videos and things like that. But again, we'll try and streamline it if we can. And sorry, going back to your first question, does documentation support need to be attached to the grant report? No, it does not. And so once we receive all of the information, sort of everything that was listed in that pre-grant section, once we receive that from you, that's on file with finance. We are good to go unless that information changes or somehow becomes out of date for whatever reason and you need to update it. And Isabel does a really great job of making sure we have all of that stuff from you before we distribute any grant funding. So if we need anything like that from you, Isabel will be sure to reach out. And if you do not have, if you are not your own 501c3 and you do not have your IRS determination letter, again, we can always work with a fiscal sponsor and figure out how to get the grant funding, how to get the resources that you need using a fiscal sponsor. So yeah, hope that answers your question, Sherry. Thank you. So we've got another one from Rental Properties. The grant has changed our site a lot. We're really looking forward to it this season. Oh, that's just a comment. Fantastic. Send us some before and after photos. We love seeing a transformational change between those before and after photos. So yeah, we maybe, you know, if you send us enough content, as I said, maybe we can even do a photo blog or something like that that goes out through the national Conservation Fund communication channels and could potentially help you reach perhaps an audience that you haven't reached before. So from Delphine, we currently do not have an active grant. Does that mean you're still working on it and will get it to us? Miss Delphine, let's take that conversation offline, but we'd be happy to follow up with you after this. All right. So it looks like those are all of the. Sorry, go ahead, Isabel.
Sorry, I think we did miss a question. Do I need to revise my start date if the funding has not been released yet? Yeah, we'll always stay in contact, especially when sometimes it takes a little longer. Grant extensions are always welcome to ask for them. So feel free to always just email us or let us know if you have any questions or concerns regarding that and your end date. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Ms. Wanda, we know specifically that part of the reason that your funding has been so delayed was on the part of the Conservation Fund. So we certainly can work with you and make sure that we accommodate that and get a grant extension in place as needed. So yeah, thank you for catching that one, Isabel. All right. Well, this was fantastic. I think for our very first Lunch and Learn, we could not have asked for it to have gone any better. So thank you all again for joining, and Isabel will be sending out a thank you email, just a follow-up email. We will include links to some of the documents that we've shared, and of course, a link to this recording. And please feel free to share that recording. If you were able to attend, or perhaps you're the executive director, and you know that there's someone else on your team that will be taking the lead on actually completing the grant reporting, then you might want to share the recording with them. So yeah, just some ideas for you all. But yeah, thank you again. This was fantastic and looking forward to catching up with each of you soon.